The war between the United Human Colonies and the Tarkesh Dominion had left entire worlds scarred and abandoned. Cities that once glittered with technology now lay in ruins, and the air smelled of ash and chemicals. On the planet Varkas IV, the final battles had ended days ago, leaving only silence and smoke behind. Amid the rubble, human medic Evan Carter moved carefully, checking for survivors. His uniform was torn, his gloves worn, and his hands were covered in dirt and dried blood. But he kept moving because he knew that somewhere out there someone might still need him. Evan had seen enough death to last a lifetime. He had treated soldiers from his own side and the enemy alike. He had learned long ago that pain and suffering did not recognize borders or flags. That knowledge had kept him alive, and it had earned him a reputation among both humans and Tarkesh soldiers as someone who saved lives without judgment. But even he was not prepared for what he would find that evening. The wind howled across the barren landscape, lifting dust and scraps of metal. Evan's scanner beeped faintly, signaling a lifeform nearby. Following the signal, he discovered the wreckage of a small hovercraft. The metal hull was bent and smoking, sparks flying from broken wires. Inside, among twisted panels and shredded fabric, lay a young alien woman. She was badly injured, her uniform bearing the royal insignia of the Tarkesh Dominion. Her eyes fluttered open, sharp and wary, and she immediately tried to pull herself up. A sharp piece of metal clattered to the ground as she instinctively reached for it. Evan crouched slowly, showing no fear. "Stop, you'll hurt yourself more," he said calmly. His voice was steady, controlled, and strange in its gentleness. The princess froze, staring at him. Her blue skin glimmered faintly under the fading sun, her hair tangled with dust and debris, and her breathing was uneven. She was Princess Lysera, daughter of the tyrant king who had led the Tarkesh Dominion against countless human colonies. The thought of saving her made Evan hesitate for only a moment. She was the enemy, yes, but she was also dying. "I said stop," Evan repeated, moving closer but keeping his hands visible. Lysera's eyes narrowed, filled with suspicion and pride. No one had ever spoken to her this way, not even her father's generals. She was used to fear, obedience, and intimidation, not calm, quiet authority. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then, almost reluctantly, she lowered her hand. Evan reached out carefully and helped her sit up, examining her injuries. Her leg was crushed, and there were deep lacerations along her side. She winced sharply, but she didn't scream. "You'll need a splint for your leg," he said softly, setting down his medkit. Lysera's pride flared. "I don't need your help, human," she hissed. Evan only shook his head. "You will if you want to live." For the next few hours, Evan worked methodically. He cleaned her wounds with purified water, applied medical gel to prevent infection, and built a splint from the remnants of the hovercraft. Lysera watched him silently, her arms crossed, her pride preventing any sign of gratitude. At first she tried to insult him, calling him weak, slow, and unworthy. Evan did not respond. His focus never wavered. He spoke only when necessary, explaining each step in a way she could understand. Night fell and the wind grew colder. Evan built a small shelter from wreckage and debris, covering it with a tarp to protect them from the elements. He gave her some rations, enough to keep her alive, though not enough to feel like a feast. Lysera looked at the small portions suspiciously, as if expecting poison, but she ate anyway. The silence between them stretched long. She watched him move with precision and care, and slowly something began to change. She had never seen a human care for an enemy without expecting something in return. Over the next few days, Evan tended to her injuries with the same patience and professionalism. He never asked her about her title or her father. He did not lecture her on politics or war. He treated her as a patient, nothing more, nothing less. And that simple respect confused Lysera. She was used to people treating her as a weapon, a pawn, or a threat. No one had ever treated her as a person before. One morning she tried to stand, leaning heavily on the splint. She winced, and Evan caught her before she fell. "You need more time," he said gently. "I can't allow you to push yourself too soon." Lysera's eyes flashed with anger and pride. "I am not a child to be coddled," she snapped. But even as she spoke, she relied on his support, and a tiny flicker of respect began to form. Evan only smiled faintly. "You are stronger than you think," he said. Their routine was interrupted by distant noises, metal scraping against metal, the faint hum of engines. Tarkesh patrols were nearby. Evan's first thought was to hide, but Lysera's eyes widened in fear and she instinctively tried to move toward him. Without thinking, he positioned himself in front of her. "Stay behind me," he instructed. The patrols drew closer. Evan knew that if they were discovered, both of them would be captured or worse. He whispered instructions to Lysara, telling her to remain still, to breathe slowly, and to trust him. She obeyed, her pride battling with instinct. The patrols passed, scanning the area, but somehow they missed the small shelter. Evan exhaled slowly once they were gone. Lysara looked at him with a mix of awe and confusion. Why did you risk yourself?" she asked quietly. "Because it's the right thing to do," Evan replied simply. "Not because of who you are or who your father is. Because it's right." The words struck her in a way she could not explain. She had never heard anyone speak like that before. Her life had been filled with fear, obedience, and cruelty. And now she saw a human willing to protect her even though she was the enemy. Days turned into a week. Lysara's wounds began to heal and her strength slowly returned. She walked with Evan's help, learning to trust him in small ways. She began to ask questions, not about politics or war, but about humans, about medicine, and about Evan himself. He answered simply, never hiding anything, never exaggerating. His honesty was refreshing, and for the first time she felt a strange sense of safety. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and red, Lysara spoke softly. You are different from what I expected," she admitted. Evan looked at her, surprised but calm. "Different how?" he asked. "Not cruel, not weak, not afraid," she said. "Most humans are predictable. They hate us. They kill without hesitation, but you are not like that." Evan smiled faintly. "I do what I can. That's all any of us can do." For a moment, silence fell over them, broken only by the wind. Lysara felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. Gratitude, yes, but also curiosity and perhaps even respect. She had never allowed anyone to see her as a person before. Not her father, not her generals, not even her tutors. But this human, this medic, had done just that. Suddenly the ground shook. An explosion rocked the ruins. Dust and debris filled the air, and Evan grabbed Lysara, shielding her from falling metal. The patrols had returned, alerted by distant scouts. They were closing in fast, and there was no time to hide. Evan looked at Lysara, his expression calm but determined. "Hold on to me," he instructed. They ran through the ruins, dodging burning debris and crumbling walls. Lysara tried to fight, to push him away, but his grip was firm. For the first time in her life, she realized that she was relying on a human, not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as someone who cared about her survival. They reached a small alcove just as the patrols arrived. Plasma weapons hummed and fired, scorching the walls around them. Evan covered Lysara, moving her behind a broken column. He returned fire, not to kill, but to distract, giving her a chance to move safely. She watched him in disbelief. This human, who had no formal combat training, was holding back trained Tarkesh soldiers. The firefight lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, Evan and Lysara were still alive, though exhausted. Lysara's pride had been stripped away completely. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you just run?" "Because you're not just a princess," he said. "You're a person. And people deserve a chance to live, no matter who they are." For the first time, Lysara felt something she had never felt before. Trust. And perhaps somewhere deep inside, hope. That night, as they huddled together in the shelter, Lysara realized that her life had changed forever. The human medic had not only saved her body, but had also begun to heal something inside her that she had never known was broken. Her sense of humanity. And she did not yet know it. But her gratitude would soon take a form that would surprise both of them, and change the destiny of worlds. The morning after the firefight, the ruins of Varkas IV were eerily quiet. Smoke rose from burned-out buildings, and the wind carried the scent of scorched metal. Evan and Lysara had spent the night in relative safety, hidden under the remains of a collapsed structure. Lysara's injuries were mostly healed, but her body still ached from the exertion of the escape and the shock of recent events. She sat quietly, watching Evan clean and repair his equipment, his movements steady and methodical as always. She wanted to speak, but words failed her. Her pride, once so fierce, had been tempered by the human's kindness and bravery. He had saved her life multiple times, risked his own for her safety, and never once treated her as anything other than a person. Slowly, a new understanding formed in her mind. He was not like any human she had ever known. "We need to leave this place," Evan said finally, breaking the silence. "The patrols will be back soon." Lysara nodded, rising carefully to test her strength. "I can walk," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Evan stayed close, keeping a protective hand near her. Together they moved through the ruins, avoiding the main roads and scavenging small supplies along the way. They traveled for hours, their path winding through broken city blocks and scorched plains. Evan remained vigilant, scanning constantly for patrols or drones. Lysara followed closely, leaning on him when necessary, her mind racing. She had been raised to rule, to manipulate, and to dominate, yet here she was relying on a human to survive. The thought was uncomfortable, yet strangely liberating. As the day wore on, they reached a small cave hidden among jagged cliffs. It offered shelter, water from a trickling stream, and enough space for them to rest. Evan set up a small camp, and Lysara watched him with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "You are very patient," she said finally. "I have to be," he replied. "People are fragile. You never know how much time you have with them." She nodded, absorbing the words. They ate in silence, the quiet interrupted only by the sound of the stream and the distant cries of birds. For the first time in her life, Lysara felt safe without the need to command or control. She was simply a person among another person, and that realization unsettled her as much as it comforted her. Later that evening, they heard movement outside the cave. Evan crouched ready, signaling Lysara to stay back. A group of Tarkesh scouts had discovered their trail. They were heavily armed and moving cautiously. Evan weighed their options. They could try to escape, but with Lysara's still healing leg, it would be difficult. Fighting was risky, yet doing nothing was impossible. Evan made a decision. He grabbed Lysara's arm and whispered, "Trust me." Together they stepped out of the cave, using the terrain to their advantage. Rocks and cliffs hid their movements as they maneuvered into a narrow passage. The scouts followed, unaware that Evan had anticipated their path. With precise timing, he triggered a small rock slide, blocking the passage and buying them crucial minutes. They ran, the landscape blurring past them, until finally they reached a plateau overlooking the valley below. Evan turned to Lysara. "We can't stay here long. We need to reach the human outpost. It's not far." Lysara looked down at the valley, her heart pounding. "The outpost? They won't kill me, will they?" Evan shook his head. "No, you won't be a target there. They don't judge. They only care about saving lives." The journey continued, long and arduous. Lysara struggled, but Evan's steady presence and encouragement kept her moving. Along the way, she began to speak more freely, asking questions about humans, their colonies, and their values. Evan answered simply, honestly, never hiding the harsh truths of war, yet always emphasizing the importance of compassion and courage. By the time they reached the outpost, night had fallen. Lights from the human settlement twinkled in the distance, and the sight brought a sense of relief neither of them had expected. Guards at the entrance hesitated when they saw Lysara, but Evan explained her situation, emphasizing her condition and the risk she had faced. After a tense moment, they allowed her inside. Inside the outpost, Lysara received proper medical attention. Her injuries were fully treated, and she was given food, clean clothes, and a place to rest. Evan remained by her side, helping her adjust and ensuring that she was safe. For the first time, she felt the absence of fear. She could breathe without watching every shadow, without expecting betrayal. As the days passed, Lysara observed humans in a way she had never done before. She saw their kindness, their discipline, and their willingness to protect one another even in the midst of war. She realized that everything she had been taught about humans was a lie or a half-truth. They were not monsters. They were not weak. They were capable of incredible bravery and compassion. One evening, as they sat together outside the outpost, Lysara turned to Evan. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "You knew who I was. You knew the things my father has done." Evan looked at her, his expression calm. "Because it was the right thing to do. Not because of who you are or who your father is, because every life matters. Everyone deserves a chance." Lysara remained silent for a long time, absorbing the words. They were simple yet powerful. They carried a weight she had never encountered before. She realized that she owed this human more than her life. She owed him her trust, her gratitude, and perhaps something more, something she could not yet name. the peace was short-lived. News arrived that the Tarkesh Dominion had discovered her absence and was sending forces to retrieve her. The outpost prepared for possible attacks, but Lysara refused to leave. "I will face them," she said. "Not as a princess, but as someone who has learned what humans can be. I will not be a weapon for my father any longer." Evan watched her carefully, recognizing both the courage and the risk. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I will stand with you." When the Tarkesh forces arrived, they were met not with surrender but with strategy and determination. Lysara took the lead, using knowledge of her father's tactics combined with Evan's guidance. They avoided direct confrontation, using ambushes, traps, and careful planning to minimize casualties. Slowly, the Tarkesh soldiers began to falter, surprised by the humans' ingenuity and the princess's new perspective. Finally, after days of careful maneuvering, Lysara and Evan confronted the Tarkesh forces at a narrow canyon. With precise coordination, they forced the enemy to retreat, capturing the surviving soldiers without unnecessary violence. Lysara stood tall, her body strong and her mind clear. She had faced her own people, her father's forces, and she had prevailed, not through cruelty or dominance, but through courage, strategy, and the guidance of a human who believed in her. After the battle, Lysara returned to the human outpost. She called for a council, speaking openly about her experiences and the lessons she had learned. "Humans are not our enemies," she told the council. "They are our teachers in courage, in compassion, and in honor. And the human who saved me has shown me that the right choice is not always the easiest, but it is always worth it." The council was silent, absorbing her words. Evan stood beside her, watching quietly. He did not seek recognition, but he could feel the respect in her gaze. Lysara's transformation was complete. She was no longer the rebellious, prideful princess. She was a leader in her own right, shaped not by fear or tyranny, but by understanding and gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Lysara took steps to rebuild her world. She worked with human engineers, medics, and strategists to restore the cities and care for the people. She made alliances not through coercion, but through trust and cooperation. And throughout it all, Evan remained by her side, not as a servant, not as a subject, but as a friend, a guide, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the restored city, Lysara turned to him. "I cannot repay you for what you have done," she said quietly. Evan shook his head. "You don't need to. Seeing you alive, seeing you choose a better path, that is enough." She smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Then I will give you something else," she said. "You will be honored as the guardian of Tarkesh. Your name will be remembered not as a human who fought against us, but as the human who taught us what it means to be courageous, kind, and just." Evan looked at her, touched but humble. He never imagined such recognition. For him, the reward had never been fame or power. It had been the simple act of saving a life, of choosing to do the right thing. And now, that choice had changed the course of a world. As the night fell and stars glittered in the sky, Lysara and Evan stood together, watching the new dawn of Tarkesh. The war had ended not with domination but with understanding, and the bond forged between a human medic and a princess would be remembered for generations as the moment when humanity showed its greatest strength, its heart.